What is up, people? It is your host, Aphelion, and welcome back to the Ephemeris podcast. It is the 10th episode of the season, and we're not even done with the Greeks, which is wow. Anyways, time will fly by. Don't worry about that. Today's episode is about Plato, and I realized I made a fatal mistake as soon as I started the research on this podcast. And that fatal mistake is the fact that Aristotle is a student of Plato, so I definitely did not cover these two in the correct order, but I guess it'll make for some good suspense. So, the reason why it would make for great suspense is because Plato had the greatest cosmological piece from antiquity known as Timaeus. So, anyways, let's talk a little bit about Plato himself first. So, he was born in the late 4th century BCE, and he lived through some crazy tumultuous times. His dad died early, mom remarried, and a whole lot of crazy things happened during his early years, but he was primarily influenced by Socrates, and in that sense, he is a Socratic philosopher. And he was also influenced by the Pythagoreans, which we kind of see through his math and politics. I don't think we'll talk about it too much here, but a lot of his mathematics had to do with geometry and kind of like, polyhedrons, and that came a lot from what he learned from the Pythagoreans. So, yeah, that's that. After Socrates' death, Plato spent time in southern Italy, Greece, and Egypt, and that's where he met with Archytas, and obviously Archytas had some affiliations with Philolaus, so kind of creating some bridges between Pythagoreanism and Platonism, I guess. Plato also created an academy that Aristotle joined at 17, hence, Aristotle is the student of Plato. And yeah, that's pretty much his life. Don't want to get too deep into that. Let's get into the juices, the astronomy stuff. So, obviously, I think you guys know the drill now. We obviously warm up with a little bit of metaphysics, so let's just do that. So, Plato had a very fascinating interpretation of abstract objects, and he believed that certain objects existed that don't exist in space or time and also aren't kind of associated with us personally. They're just objective things that kind of don't have much of a manifestation. So there's some interesting examples that encapsulate this concept. So let's put it this way. Let's say, for example, you have a Carolina Reaper. It's a hot pepper if you don't know. The two most obvious things you would say about it is that it is red and it's spicy, because those are the most noticeable things about it. So, the first characteristic, the fact that it's red, it doesn't exist in space as long as we don't introduce, advanced scientific concepts like optics and how, like, photons hit our retina and stuff like that. And it doesn't exist in time, nor is it dependent on kind of us interpreting it as red, because it is objectively red. And so the quality of being red is kind of an object that Plato would consider abstract, or kind of platonism. I don't know how to say it, but you get the idea. Now, for spicy, the quality of being spicy, again, doesn't exist in space or time, and it's not necessarily that we don't interpret spiciness. It kind of exists beyond us anyways, like it is spicy. So, yeah, it's obviously super debatable, but since science has an explanation for all five senses, that makes things complicated. But for example, they're like, if you take the quality of being the number three, like the quantity three, that is an example that's still valid today, but I've thrown out enough examples. So the importance of this idea essentially is mainly how it expands into the concepts of universals or universal objects, and almost maybe introduces an important factor that we will discuss further down the line. So I'm not going to dig in too deep into that, because the theory gets super duper complicated, because obviously it is philosophy from a very, very long time ago. It gets into stuff like immanent realism, which I do not want to talk about. So, all right, more astronomy coming your way. There is Plato's theory on creation, and not like creation of the universe just yet, but creation. So, in Timaeus, which I referred to earlier, the dynamic process of creation is based on the integration of reason, necessity, and receptacle. And according to Plato, necessity exists prior to creation, and he doesn't really offer a explicit definition for it. He just mentions it and refers to necessity, or refers he refers necessity to the dynamic transformation process of fire, earth, water, and air, which are four elements that we talked about with Aristotle. So that kind of pre-existed in Plato's theories as well. And to Plato, necessity cannot claim self-identity because it's really indeterminate, and its properties are very weird. So basically, after necessity, Plato stated that reason had to predominate necessity to lead to creation. And the integration of reason and necessity must be complemented by receptacle in order to render forms intelligible to the world soul. And this is just kind of some really nice statements that I've pulled from some of the articles that I was looking at. So basically, you have necessity, that's just kind of out there, and then you have reason that kind of puts it in its place, and receptacle just creates the necessary trio, or is a really nice complement. So yeah, it almost sounds like he's trying to construe some sort of fable when you're trying to look at the way that he explains a lot of these things in Timaeus, but I think he admits that Timaeus is metaphorical. Again, that is a whole bunch of BS that I'm not going to cover right now. So with that, let's transition to the most important piece of Plato's Timaeus. I've already referenced it like 2 or 3 times. So basically what it was a combination of narrations and dialogues that essentially came together to become what you can consider a theory of the universe. And I talked about how it sounds like a fable and it's metaphorical, so you kind of get the idea of what this piece kind of looks like or seems to be. And it's difficult to digest this thing as a whole. Like, I tried reading through parts that in review articles they mentioned were important, but if I were to go through the whole thing and look for pieces of text to reference to talk about and analyze, like, it would take forever because it's just a really difficult text. And so I'm just going to conduct a quick analysis in an order that follows the progression of the dialogue, just to make our lives real easy. So the first claim that can be found in this text, again in chronological order, is the answer to, are we alone in the universe? Which is interesting. I don't think we've had an episode where this question has been answered or even referred to, so here we go. The quote goes something like this. Are there many worlds or one only? That is the fourth question. One only. For if in the original there had been more than one, they would have been the parts of a third, which would have been the true pattern of the world, and therefore there is and will ever be but one created world. So, I mean, basically it seems like what he's trying to say is 3 is the perfect number. If there were more than one world, it would have to be 3 to create some balance. I don't know. But that is the quote. And so after that, Plato goes into the creation of the human, and he uses ratios, which sounds kind of like the ratios and harmonies with Philolaus again. There is Pythagorean influence to Plato, so nothing too surprising. So I think the quote where I found this information, it went some like, in this manner, there were formed intervals of thirds, 3 halves, of fourths, 4 thirds, and of ninths, 9 eighths. So yeah, it was just a quick reference that I thought had some significance or relevance. Moving on, so he had a long-winded reasoning behind the creation of the universe. So now this is not just creation, but specifically the creation of the cosmos. So this is a very long quotation. I'm just going to read it off and we're going to digest this afterwards. So here we go. God made the sun and the moon and 5 other wanderers, as they are called, 7 in all, and to each of them he gave a body moving in an orbit, being one of the 7 orbits into which the circle of the other was divided. So here he's mentioning the orbits, and it's definitely a bit confusing to visualize this model that he's creating in his head, but I think if you consider that he had a geocentric take on the universe, it is likely that he's referring to all the sun and moon and 5 wanderers having orbits around the earth. Yeah, so yeah, and to each of them he gave a body moving in an orbit. Yeah, so basically he's saying God gave an orbit to each of the bodies, and the orbits in terms of distance were created using other circles. So yeah, that's that. I don't want to trip over my words. Let's continue. He put the moon in the orbit which was nearest to the earth, the sun in that next, the morning star and Mercury in the orbits which move opposite to the sun but with equal swiftness. This being the reason why they overtake and are overtaken by one another. So basically what he's saying here is he's explaining the overlapping orbits of the moon, the sun, and kind of Mercury and Venus. And so the order that he puts it in is moon is closest to Earth in orbit, and then it's sun, and then it's Mercury and Venus. So yeah, let's continue. All these bodies became living creatures and learnt their appointed task and began to move, the nearer more swiftly, the remoter more slowly, according to the diagonal movement of the other. So basically he's just kind of metaphorically giving he's personifying the celestial bodies by saying that they learned how to move in a way that like was coordinated with other orbits. All right, and since this was controlled by the movement of the same, the 7 planets in their courses appeared to describe spirals, and that appeared fastest which was the slowest, and that which overtook others appeared to be overtaken by them. So I think he's trying to use some interesting characteristics about these orbits that make them counterintuitive. And God lighted a fire in the 2nd orbit from the earth, which is called the sun, to give light over the whole heaven and to teach intelligent beings that knowledge of number which is derived from the revolution of the same. So yeah, he's just that sentence is pretty self-explanatory. Thus arose day and night, which are the periods of the most intelligent nature. A month is created by the revolution of the moon, a year by that of the sun. Other periods of wonderful length and complexity are not observed by men in general. There is moreover a cycle or perfect year at the completion of which they all meet and coincide. To this end the stars came into being, that the created heaven might imitate the eternal nature. So yeah, he basically just says that instead of Earth revolving around the sun revolving around the Earth, creates a year, and then a month is created by the moon orbiting the Earth, which I think is still accurate today, because the moon does orbit Earth. So yeah, and then he talks about a perfect year existing in which all of the heavenly bodies align, and the stars coming into being. So yeah, outside of these textually cited claims, which I personally digged for, there are some other references to mention, or kind of like, yeah, pretty much references. In the prelude to Timaeus, Plato postulates that the creation of this living world is modeled after an eternal and unchangeable world of forms. Now, forms and matter were a part of Aristotle's and Plato's metaphysics that I did not delve too much into because it didn't have much merit. But yeah, just understand that form is sort of their metaphysical concept that kind of personifies space almost. Or well, no, actually that's a little bit false because matter would sort of do that as well. But basically, form and matter are supposed to be the manifestation of the idea of space. So yeah, um, so he postulates that the creation of this living world is modeled after an eternal and unchangeable world of forms, and it's everlasting, has no beginning or end. This sensible, intangible world must have a beginning, is what was said in the article that I was reading. Thus, Plato introduces a creator god in this creation story, and he believes that the creator god is inherently good. And if I forget what he says about if he is inherently bad, but no need to get too deep into that one. Analytically, the Platonic cosmos consists of the world body and the world soul, so a little bit of spiritual stuff's added into there. They're interwoven from the center to the outermost heaven and enveloping the all round on the outside. However, so that's also an interesting idea to cover there, and that comes straight from his Timaeus. We talked about kind of the elements, earth, air, fire, water, having a part in the creation of the universe. And what we did not talk about, though, is those elements being guided by the principle of unity in order to prevent dissolution, aging, and sickness, which is interesting, kind of connecting the human condition to the creation of the universe. I know we've seen that across some of the other episodes, but I think it's especially prevalent here. And yeah, he also refers to a spherical shape of the world body. So he believes that the shape that the universe takes on is a sphere. And a funny addition, actually, this is very much unrelated to physical sciences, but more biological sciences, because that's what he was talking about when he was writing about this stuff. He said, completeness seems to require that something should be briefly said about the other animals, first of women, who are probably degenerate and cowardly men. And when they degenerated, the gods implanted in men the desire of union with them, creating in man one animate substance and in woman another. I don't know, that was very funny. But anyways, that is all the time we have for Plato and Timaeus today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. It definitely had to do a lot more with philosophy, but I mean, hey, there's a reason why Aristotle and Plato are known for their philosophy. At least we had something about the cosmos to talk about with these two. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed listening to the podcast episode and you guys are listening on Spotify, make sure to follow. And if you guys are listening on YouTube, thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because I have seen that the proportion of people that get my videos in their homepage or looking for my content is also the same proportion of people that are not subscribed. So if you guys are the kind of people who are seeing my videos on the homepage and watching my videos, I would genuinely appreciate a subscribe on YouTube. But until next week, I will see you guys later. Peace.